Amazing. Hello, Rafa.
Hello, hello, Pedro.
Welcome to this Hyperreal interviews, Stones and Glasses, and super pleasure to have you here today. Tonight is also tonight for you, and yeah, thanks so much for being flexible. We slightly changed the time, and thanks so much. I was able to go to a very nice performance. So yes, so here we are, and I think for me to start introducing yourself, your person is a challenge here because you have done so many things, and you have a lots of interests, and I guess we have the pleasure of, or I have the pleasure of knowing you for many years, and I guess you've been a person very active in the corporate world for over 40 years, and also an entrepreneur, and also a person in an artist as an actor in the professional theater. And between 2000 and 2020, you serve as president of Nortel Networks, Cisco Systems, and also Qualcomm Latin America. And in July 2020, you co-founded EBAC, which is an biggest educational tech school in Brazil that is helping people to upskill themselves. And you're also venturing into Mexico right now, and you're a chairman there. And also in December 2020, you co-founded Alpha Capital, which is a SPAC technology that was meant to acquire a technology company in or merge with a technology company in South America. And I guess this week I saw your video there in the Nasdaq, and you merged with Semantix, which is a leading data analytics and AI platform in Latin America, and with a very successful launch with a valuation of a B, which is congratulations for that. And yeah, so it's the first deep tech company in the region of South America that is listed in the US in the Nasdaq. And so you're also like executive member there. And yeah, so I could be talking here for many more hours. You are also part of a rocket lawyer, and you invested in several companies, and you graduated in Berlin, so you also studied here. You studied aerospace engineering, right, in the TU in Berlin. And now you also like active in this like performatic art, and doing a lot of theater, and doing a lot of experimentation with yourself. So I yeah, I could go, and you speak multiple languages, and so I could be talking all those things. But I guess I'm really it's a pleasure to have you here. And I wanted to ask you, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and honor to be talking to you today, and the audience of New Kinko here through this channel. Doing great. And it's Saturday evening here in Brazil. I have a house in Barra do Saí, which is a beautiful beach in the state of Sao Paulo, and it happens that Pedro has a house here in the same area, and we know each other for many years and are here as well, having many points of contact even today. So it's a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Amazing. So, given that you have this like very vast career of in those major two fields, which is the corporate world and now also in the theater world, I wanted to ask you a few questions. And how do you navigate? Because I think you've been shifting, or you've been expanding your consciousness within those two worlds. And how is it for you to navigate? Because I guess also in the corporate world, there's a lots of politics, power, and in theater, I guess you learned how to express yourself. What does power mean? What does power mean for you?
Yes, at first I follow my passion, or more broadly, my passions in life. it's best if you can do whatever you have more fun to do, no? Which brings you the best amount of self-realization, self-fulfillment, and in my particular case, it's not only one thing. I think in general, we have different bodies as a human being. You have a mental body, you have a physical body, you have an emotional body, you have a spiritual body, you have an economic body, you have other bodies, and all of them over the course of life merit to be nurtured and explored. If you only bet on your mental body, for example, you may have a one-sided life and a challenge of not expressing yourself in the other body. So I think that we as human beings have the desire, need, potential to express ourselves in various ways. When I went into the corporate life, I always was close to the arts because I like the arts a lot. Much later on in my life, I understood what art has as a meaning for human beings. Maybe that later we can speak a little bit about that. And technology as well. I think art and technology are in a way hand in hand. These are two disciplines that are leading the way for humanity, breaking the ice, being cutting edge, not just leading edge, but cutting edge, breaking to new horizons and propulsing humanity. And so both are very intriguing to me, and I always wanted to express myself on both areas. But then at some point in time in my life, I started to bet on my professional career, and a person that was close to me said to me, okay, I had the desire to start my work on arts and culture, and he said, no, if you really want to make a career, you need to bet on one thing. You can only do one thing very well. So I followed that advice and made my career, my professional career as an executive in the technology field. But I don't believe that anymore. On the contrary, I think that each of those things that I'm doing is nurturing the other one. Example, I am a theater actor, and as an actor, you need to develop a lot of different skills. It can be very valid as well for the corporate life. Example, communications, example, team play, example, sense of timing, example, focus, being able to have full focus on a span of attention over 90 minutes in a play. And same can be very useful and valid for the corporate life. And on the other hand, on the corporate life, you develop a number of skills that can be useful as well when you work on the arts. I had, say, just in nutshell, completing that picture, until I was 40 years old, I bet on my professional career, and I dreamed of becoming a president of a large company, being member of the Young President Organization, something that is a carrot, put it that way, that I had. And I became, in fact, president of a very large company in Brazil, made that 2 years, had my lessons learned from that, left that, and said, well, that was it. I will not will wanting to work anymore in corporate life, and I want to do now what I really always wanted to do. Made many things, went to Dharamsala in the Himalayas studying Tibetan Buddhism and transpersonal psychology and other things. And among others, I also started to study theater. Typically, when you are 40 and start to study theater, it is a little bit late to make a career there. But I focused a lot and made my studies there over a course of 4.5 years. I went back to corporate life sometime later because I understood that is I did it more as a social mission rather than an ambition to have a name, a reputation, etc. And still I could manage both at the same time, studying and working as a leader and president of a company very large company, and then finished my studies and started to work on my actor's life that I am still in today, 20 years later. So I started with 43. And then when I was 50, I started as well to play on stage. And then when I was 55 or 57, I started to develop my entrepreneur career. And today I left the corporate career. I am an entrepreneur, but also I'm an artist, but also I'm interested in other stuff, socially engaged and spiritual philosophy and other stuff. So I think that you can, as a human being, do many things at the same time and do them well. Nowadays, I work as an entrepreneur on several avenues, not just on one, but I created this SPAC that you mentioned, Pedro, a special purpose acquisition company that just succeeded to merge with a leading AI and data company in Latin America. I created an EdTech, an education technology company that is doing quite well. I created or co-created a LegalTech company, and at the same time, I continue to work on the arts and culture. So it is possible to do many things in life. And do them all well. It is also possible to do only one or nearly nothing and badly, but there is nothing that is really limiting you as long as you have health and desire and joy in the things that you are doing. Back to you.
Got it. So, and let me understand. I mean, you've been doing all of those things in your life, and you experimented in all those directions, right? And what do you think, like, for you, if you're talking to the audience here, what do you think was like the most important lesson that you have had in your life, and what are the ingredients for you to keep the balance and the focus across all of those parallel roads that you're going through? And yeah, so what is the core of being able to have the consistency and being able to thrive in this environment?
Well, it's a difficult question, and I think there is no one only thing that is valid for me, and there is nothing that is valid for me and for everybody. I would say there are a few things that north my life and maybe can apply to other people as well. One, I mentioned, I don't believe that you can do only one thing good in life. You can. On the contrary, I think you need to have a balance in life. You need to be developing your bodies, as I mentioned before. The second one is follow your passion or passions. Do whatever you feel joy, because that is what you are going to express yourself the best and what you are going to feel the most fulfillment in your life, and that's important. The other one is be vulnerable. Vulnerability means that you are sensible to the things that are coming from the outside, that you can read through opportunities. There are sometimes things that happen and most of us don't look at that, don't see that, don't watch at that. And this is a door or a window that opens up and you can follow. So be always open, listen to everybody that wants to tell you something, or to the opportunities life is bringing to you. Another one that is very important is be curious the entire life, right? We learned and experienced many things already, but there are many other things that come after that, and you're only going to embark with full heart if you really embrace this desire and appetite for what comes next. And so being curious is very, very important, and learning all the time as well. Learning is not just to achieve a given level of competence or knowledge, but it is a lifelong process we are evolving as human beings and learning all the time. Learn from what others can teach you. Have mentors in life is very important. I had them and I have them. And learn in particular from the failures you made. There's nothing bad in having a failure. We're humans, and if we try, in particular, if you try new things, you are going to fail. The important thing is to learn from that and not do the same failure again, and try to see what you can extract out of this situation and do other things that follow that. These are a few things. The other one is empathy, of course, being empathetic to the other and to the group and to the cause is very important. The other is humility, and humility, I understand, is not just, I'm very humble and live very simple way. No, being humble is being tuned in to your status in life and to your potential, to your context. And but it's also very important to understand in the big context, we are just one little element, and nothing that brings us money or titles or power or acknowledgement or awareness or recognition or public visibility means by no means that we are more than anything else. So we are just one element in the chain of humanity, and humanity an element in the chain of the universe, and that's it. But being cognizant of oneself is important. Another one that's very important, be self-aware. Essential to be self-aware, essential to understand what is your potential, which are your challenges, how can I mitigate my challenges, how can I explore my potential, where am I essential not to get lost in life. So that's more or less a bunch of things that came to my mind that I think are helpful to me, maybe to others as well.
Amazing. Just to pick up on some of the things that you said. So when you talk about vulnerability, right? I would like to pick up your experience on the idea of vulnerability and the idea of power, because I think navigating the life and the context that you have been in your life, you have had to deal a lot with structures of power, and also power, and establish yourself in different contexts where potentially you needed to be very aware of how to position yourself. And how does this balance between the idea of vulnerability and power work for you, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of definition. What is power? What does power mean? And a little bit linked to leadership as well. I use power in a context of leadership on institutions, on projects that I lead, or ideas that I want to bring to fruition. And there are classical, I would say, old-fashioned types of leadership, which is I am the leader. I will be providing the instructions on how we are going to do everything. And I will mandate, because hierarchically I am the top guy. You alluded to politics. I think I was fortunate in life to work in companies that fostered more merit than politics. And today I'm not anymore in the corporate life, so I'm doing really the things that I choose to do in the context of people that I like to work with. And that is giving me the chance of not being necessarily political, but being very factual, being very objective in the pursuit of purposes that we set ourselves as a group in a given project or entity. And back to leadership and power, the modern leadership, I think, is a leadership of people that really lead by example, lead by putting themselves at disposal of a given cause or purpose, and giving what they have the best of in doing that. My experience has been in life that when you give your best, when you are aware of what you can contribute with, and you provide that you naturally are going to make a path in life and a career if you are in corporate life, or a success if you are an entrepreneur. And this naturally, as a collateral effect, will bring you as well money, and it will bring you some reputation that you can leverage on for the next project, and will bring you some experience that you collect and transform into maturity, and so on. So if you look after money, you're never going to get that. If you do the things right in a society as we live in, you're going to get there and get some money. In the same way, if you are open and lead groups as giving the best of you, you're going to also be fulfilled and successful. I have the experience now. I had the experience in my SPAC for the first time in my life to be co-founding a company and co-leading a company with my dear friend Alec Oxenford, that I admire, we are very complementary, and I never had this experience before in my life, and it worked perfectly well. When he speaks for Alpha Capital, that's the entity we have, I see myself in his words. When I take the word, I know I'm representing him, and that works well. So the notion of a pyramidal, hierarchical structure gets a little bit blurred more and more in life. What we need to understand is what we can contribute, each of us, on a given group or setting or initiative or company. And in modern life, that works fine. Vulnerability, to get back to your question or provocation, is a skill, is something that you need to have always to be able to absorb what comes from the outside, impulses. Example, people that come to speak to you and have a different idea. And it's difficult for us to hear them, accept them if we think differently. But it's very important that we do that, because we can learn, and we can eventually also change our mind, our opinion on something. But in particular, we can grow. Actually, we can see more angles to a given issue or subject or possibility of expression or whatever. So being vulnerable means listening. It means sensing the environment. It means seeing what happens in the context of your initiative. If you're in business life, see what your competitors are doing, see what the market is demanding, what the different generations that are coming up to Generation Z now, are changing in the perspective point of view. Put yourself in their shoes, try to get and play with them, with all different kinds of people, and in different kinds of environment, in different languages if possible, in different mental structures, because that's what is going to take you to get insights that are tuned with the zeitgeist, with the current way of being, and you can even get insights on, as I mentioned before, how to be in the cutting edge, how to get impulses that you get from different places or a given window opportunity, and say, well, that's where I want to play something out. Play is good, so being playful is always very helpful. Being going into, tuning into, and not simply forcing yourself into something is always helpful. But vulnerability is, as I mentioned, important. Very difficult, though, if you are a successful businessman. As an example, you start believing your success in your in yourself, and you start getting less and less vulnerable. So getting rid of this belief on you is always very helpful, to stay fresh, stay humble, and stay open.
And I guess I'm just digging a bit into the vulnerability. I mean, according to the dictionary, the vulnerability is a state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked, harmed, either physically or emotionally. And I guess also it probably, as you did this shift on your career, because I guess as being part of like bigger organizations, you have certainly a different types of vulnerability. And I guess now in your new path, I assume you are exposed to different types of vulnerabilities in this traditional sense. And I wanted to understand, because I know that your life and also with EBAC, you have this we have this mission around learning, and learning is a core important element that you can get from being open, as you describe vulnerability as sort of a way of being open, flexible to take input from others. So how was it for you to transition, uh, coming out of the corporate world and becoming some sort of now an entrepreneur, and did that created vulnerabilities inside of yourself, or uh, and how these vulnerabilities and how this your understanding of vulnerability uh, also have to do with the ability for you to keep open to learn new things?
Okay, I like that. Vulnerability is, I mentioned, being sensible to things that are around you, people that are coming to speak with you, or you going to speak with people, new environments, new technologies, new social advancements, new ways of relationship, etc. But also it gives you a degree of exposure. If you go out of your knowledge zone and mental model, etc., you are possibly going to expose yourself. The work of an actor is first something very painful, because you, on the way of building up a new play, expose yourself a lot and fail a lot. It's very, very hard. Sometimes you spend a few hours trying something out and it's not going anywhere, and it's a big failure, and you need to understand that it's part of the process, and then try again next day until you find a path to express what you want to express. But failure is something you need to count on if you really want to be, as I mentioned before, in cutting edge. It's obvious and clear that if you are doing something that is very advanced, the risk of failing is high, much higher than if you repeat things that were done before. In my particular case, I love that, and I get exposed in all senses. There is a degree of exposure that is acceptable if you are in corporate life, and the degree that is not acceptable. In particular, as I was the CEO of companies that were public companies in the US, and I represented the company in the region, and I was the face of the company. There are boundaries to that you need to know. You need to very well understand the governance of the company, the things that you can do, the things that you cannot do. But I think vulnerability goes a layer deeper into yourself, and really being open to new things, being open to new ideas, being open to new ways of expression, being open to new things that you want to embrace in life. I mentioned that when I was 40, I started to study theater. When I was 50, and one of my theater directors said, I want you to play publicly on stage. When I was nearly 60, I started to be an entrepreneur. And each of those steps require a degree of courage and a degree of knowing that some things, and sometimes you are going to be exposed or very exposed. But I said that is, for each one needs to know for him or herself how much you want to drive it, no? How much you want to take risk and expose yourself, and or how much you prefer to stay on the ground that you know. It's also, nothing is black and white. Now there are moments in life where you're stronger and say, I have courage now, and I undertake something. I will change my job. I will change the country I live in. I will change the way in which I live. And in other points of time in life, when you are weaker or when you need to give more energy to people that are around you, you say, now I will stay a little more on the field that I know and is more safe. But again, in my particular case, I love to be advancing and learning. Now to the learning part, I mentioned learning is not something that you just do once in life, but it's a lifelong activity. And there is a formal education and there is an informal learning. There are various degrees of that. The internet is now allowing us to enter and advance into various fields out of the internet with courses that you pay or not pay. So the field of education and self-education is very large. And I think that art and culture education are fundamental things for people. And it's important that the countries, people that lead the countries, politicians and business people and others understand the value that emanates from culture and education. Culture and education are two sides of the same coin. Education is something that takes you at some steps in life to the other ways of knowledge. Culture is something that gets you in tune with the spirit of your time. And both are provocative, both are helping us to be in life in a vortex, in a cyclical stage of growth, and are important. In my particular case, I think it is important for society. Therefore, I am working on culture and the arts, not just for me, but also in the sense of broadening the opportunities that are there in society. In Brazil, I am working since the beginning at a festival of theater called MITsp, which is the today largest theater festival in Brazil, Scenic Arts Festival. I work there as director for institutional relations and help structure the festival, as well as in the international bridge to other countries, because I think, again, culture is very precious for a society. And in Brazil, in particular country where I live in, there are a lot of very interesting impulses and expressions that are very little known outside of Brazil and need to be taken there. And similarly, there are a lot of very valuable artistic expressions in the world that merit to come to Brazil and provoke us. No, I like the word provocation as well a lot. So provoking means not just saying something softly, but pushing you to think differently, saying, well, Pedro, that what you have done so far, that was good maybe for the past, but going forward, it's better to do it differently, think differently because of this and that. Leave something in you that takes you to revalue your statements. And I particularly in theater as well love the theater that has these characteristics. Two fundamental characteristics. One is enchanting, because if you are enchanted, that brings you close to the beauty, and the beauty is that it connects you with the spiritual world. And at the same time, provocative to have a meaning for having this activity, this cultural or artistic activity. So that is my preference, to work in the arts that are enchanting and provocative at the same time. Of course, there are other expressions that go more in the direction of entertainment, or go more in the direction of having a nice time, a fun time, or disconnecting from my day-to-day. That is all valid, but what attracts me more is that that brings a deeper sense to the expression of the arts. Back to you.
Amazing. I guess one of the topics that we always like to talk about is the topic of tipping points. And through this conversation around vulnerability, and also around the courage that you mentioned that you have to kind of transition to new phases and embrace new challenges, I wanted to understand from you how you see this idea of like macro tipping points, right? Because you're saying like I like to be on the edge, I like to be on the cutting edge. So that means it probably requires you to be very curious about the macro tipping points, so the macro changes that will lead to like this point of bigger change. And then and how does your understanding of like seeing a macro change encourages you to to shift those within your life, big changes that you've had or that you have?
Yeah, interesting. And I think we are living in a moment of fundamental change that is coming from the technology evolution and from the social evolution. But in both fields, technology and social, there is a lot happening as we speak. And there are those waves that take you to other moments and tipping points. So we had the wave of in technology of this ground or general purpose technologies, GPTs, that changed not just one area of life, but the entire society. Agriculture 5,000 years ago, domestication of plants and animals brought a different society up. And then we had the Gutenberg with a book of printing, and we had the steam machine and the industrial revolution, and we had the computers in the 20th century that changed, potentialized a lot what we were doing and processing. Then we had the personal computer, then we had the internet coming up, then we had the internet 1.0, 2.0. Now we are on the tipping point of 3.0, which might be interesting. Hopefully it's going to come as we think of going away from centralized few very powerful providers of platforms to a more decentralized way of dealing with the internet. And as a and another vector of actuation, there is the going away from the from 2D to 3D, going into the metaverse that is going to give us a chance to connect with other people or brands or educational materials in a very immersive way throughout the world at the same time in a very cost-effective manner. And that's going to bring a new wave of interaction, of life in business, life in social, life in education, life in culture. There are several other aspects that are very that are tipping points that are going to take us in a different direction. I am very close now to artificial intelligence and data. Artificial intelligence uses basically data to get trained and assertive. and data is now becoming massively available on anything, any interaction, any transaction, any process, and the processing power of data and the storage and the sharing and the analytics and the machine learning is more and more available now. And I'm working now through the merger we did recently on a company that intends to democratize the access to data, to big data, and to artificial intelligence, because it was so far not that simple and not that inexpensive. But breaking that, I think we are going to see a more large-scale usage of those technologies, and that brings up again the question of employment, or how are we going to make use of our time. In Industrial Revolution, the physical effort of human beings was displaced by machines in manufacturing facilities, in agriculture, etc. Then in transportation, then in energy creation, etc. Now, artificial intelligence is going to displace areas of work that we have been doing that are simply better done by computers or by robots, and we will need to reinvent ourselves in order to make use of our capabilities. I think always positively. I think that we don't have less work now than we had before the Industrial Revolution, and we are not going to have less work after the artificial intelligence revolution than we have today, / data revolution than we have today. On the contrary, we are striving to get works done that are more and more aligned with our higher capabilities as human beings. Instead of doing something that is physical only, we can do now something that is more mental, emotional. Instead of doing something that is using just the analytical intelligence, we can tap into other spheres of intelligence that are higher than the analytical one and develop those and become human beings that are doing things that are more interesting and are more self-fulfilled. So back to the tipping points, we are at the tipping point where artificial intelligence coupled with robotics and Internet of Things are going to really bring a new reality to us in humanity, and we will need to learn to deal with that in a good manner. We are also, there is this idea of getting transformed from an era of scarcity that we always lived in an era of abundance, because the access to energy is going to be much simpler, more inexpensive, the access to food in the world as well. We just need to be careful on how we deal with things and not impact adversely the ecology, adversely the society, and also being fair in the distribution of wealth that we fail to consistently until today, and we still risk to fail in the near future. Back to you.
Interesting. I mean, I like that you're so positive about all of those technologies, although there are clearly substantial risks coming with them and potential hazards. Yeah, it's always good to try to stay positive and look at the potential of something. And I guess one could also dedicate quite some interesting time to looking at those risks and hazards and trying to make the technology therefore better by understanding where it could go wrong, right?
Yes, I agree, and I think technology by itself is not harmful. The harm can come in how we use technology. I don't know, a light itself that is in this room is good for you to see me here. But if I focus it very much in a laser beam, I can damage something. And I can also use it because it can become very powerful, and I can cut steel, and I can do a surgery on my eyes. So it can be very good, but it can also be very bad, depending on how I use that. And the same is valid for social innovation. So I can do some innovations that are very powerful, but depending on how I apply them, I can harm society or harm people. And social media today is great, but it can also be very bad. It can lead to depression. It can lead to people feeling bad. It can lead to dependency. It can lead to kind of a drug status. So it depends on how we deal with that. And this is the key to that. We need to raise the level of our consciousness individually and as a society in order to make good use of technical innovation and social innovation. Otherwise, some of us are going to benefit to the detriment of many others and the planet in which we live. So if we're not conscient about that, then that's very bad. And consciousness comes from, of course, education, of course, culture, of course, being interested in deeper things like philosophy, spirituality, psychology, etc. Back to you.
Interesting. And just when we talk about AI and technology, and we talk about all the processing power required to do that, I think, especially in this year of 2022, we inevitably come to have to think about the geopolitical tensions that we have around. I mean, you worked in a semiconductor industry, which is an industry that is at the core of like some geopolitical tensions. And when we think about AI here, and we think about like that, all your the all the way your way of thinking and looking at the world has comes with a lot of influence from Western philosophy and um, Western way of thinking, in Luminism to French Revolution, all those senses that kind of define the some key ideas there. And but if you look at this sort of like context of what is data collection, what is AI, how we are building it, and how we are building now a world that somehow, I mean, you've lived through a time of the Iron Curtain, and right now somehow there's a decoupling of some things. How do you see that, particularly with the experience that you have related to the semiconductor industry, but also related to AI? And how do you see risks? How do you see that situation?
Yeah, thank you. Danger is, as I mentioned before, always there when you question how to apply something, how to apply technology, how to apply social innovation, how to apply a given tool, how to apply money, how to apply laws, how to apply governance. So the world, I don't consider humanity as a species that is so far very mature. On the contrary, we are living through many pains and many failures, individually and collectively. And I think over time it's a big learning exercise, but we are still very immature in various fields. We have tensions in the world because we still are thinking of nation states that defend their own interests and that oppose to other nation states that themselves defend other interests and see themselves isolated. I am here, and the other one is my enemy, so I need to destroy it or shelter it. Whereas in the end, we are all sharing the same planet. This vision has not yet permeated throughout the globe. You spoke about Western way of looking into things. Yes, there is a Western culture, there is a Western philosophy, there is an Eastern way of living and history and legacy. The world is getting closer and closer, smaller and smaller, and we have the chance and ability to learn from not just the French Revolution, the Greeks and the Romans and the recent Western superpowers, the Netherlands and Britain and Spain and Portugal and the US, etc. But we can also look and get inspired by other communities throughout the world or countries that have done tremendous things and progressed a lot, historically and contemporary. Still, we live in a world that is highly risky. And I take the example, we have a war now that is fairly unexplainable, how it comes that we are still so primitive, that we are killing each other and destroying very valuable cities and buildings and lives in Ukraine and Russia. But we also have a upcoming very high tension in Taiwan, between China and Taiwan. And interestingly enough, if we speak about semiconductors, the largest foundries and semiconductor integration companies are in Taiwan, or most of them are in Taiwan. There's a lot of expertise there, and we are very dependent on Taiwan. We are struggling now on the semiconductor life with a lack of supply in the world, and that is affecting the supply of cars, because cars need displays, cars need semiconductors. There is 1,000 chips in a car modernly, and many of the systems work through semiconductors and so on and so forth. And I'm not yet sure we are cognizant of the risk that there is if we let Taiwan get blanked out, which is a possibility. I hope it's not going to happen, but that is one of the several concerns that are around the world. Countries that have nuclear weapons and are sometimes very small, but they can believe that they need now to use a nuclear weapon and wipe out a city or a country, and other tensions that we see in the world happening that can be very, very dangerous. Hopefully it is not. So we live in a time now since the Second World War with a lower amount of wars than we had before in history of humankind, and hopefully that is going to continue and become less and less the case. But there is a risk out there, and as I mentioned before, consciousness is very important. If and when we understand that we all share the same planet, and that we all are equals and all are living in a brotherhood society around the world, and not in silos or in classes or in races or in genders or in privileged tribes or clubs, then I think we will have won a big step ahead. We are not yet there, but perhaps things that we mentioned before can help us there. And that is education, and that is culture, and that is the arts, and that is the awareness, and that is history, and that is philosophy, and that is interaction in the world. social interaction in a fair and horizontal manner. Back to you.
Very interesting. Yes, I think we covered. I mean, I would have naturally more questions, but I don't want to extend too much here our frame. As we said, we were sticking to an hour. I mean, I think that's very interesting, and I mean, we covered so much from personal life to ending here in this like specifics of semiconductor geopolitical peculiarities. Um, but before we close, I would like to understand yours. How do you? Because we're talking here about like very particular type of knowledge and culture and understanding. And when you look at like all this like First Nation cultures in the world that bring a complete different or have a complete different way of relating to the world or celebrating being alive, like how does a person or how do we look from all this like technological society and all this like particularly cultured society from Western perspective as we are speaking, like how do you see all those First Nations and what they bring and what is their role in this like time here and now?
Yeah, difficult to say which are the First Nations and which are the second and the third ones. We have always had nation states that believe they are the leaders in the world, and to some degree they are to preserve the values that they believe in. And when there are other nations that don't do that, then they crush them, punish them, or make blockades or whatever. And as well, yes.
I mean, like First Nation in terms of like indigenous tribes, either in Brazil or Canada or
Okay.
America, all of those that do not particularly uh, are not like some sort of derivation of some Western culture, but were
Okay.
having some native lifestyle that has evolved disconnected from this more connected history, which is the history of the nations that developed and crossed their path.
Yeah, great, thank you. I am fortunate to live in Brazil. I was not born here, but this country offered me to live here. My wife is Brazilian. My three daughters live here. Each one was born in a different country, but we live here now for many years. And I'm very fortunate, I said, because this is a very rich country, in some senses, the richest country in the world, in particular in diversity. Ethnical diversity and natural resources diversity and geographic diversity. It's a very large country, a very rich country, and diversity. I mean, I think diversity is one of the secret ingredients or most important ingredients to richness. And this country is very diverse. And that comes as well from the ethnical diversity. So we are one of the two countries that has most amount of languages that are not related to each other, because we had ethnical indigenous people that lived by themselves for forever until very recently. Some of them even today are, so to say, undiscovered or untouched by other societies. So we have many different cultures and languages in this country. And I said one of two because the other one is India, but Brazil is very, very rich and has still millions of people that that follow their original indigenous tradition and language and culture and ways of living. And some of them are very, they can teach us a lot. I give you the example of the Amazon region, the largest forest in the world. 10% of the entire world sweet water is in one of the states of Brazil, which is the Amazon state. And they have lived them for over 10,000 years without destroying the Amazon, in harmony with the Amazonian forest, which is important for Amazon, but also important for the region I live in, which is Sao Paulo, because we should be a desert and are very exuberant plants and animals, because there are rivers of water that come in, they are called the flying rivers, that come from the Amazon region and come to rain in this part of the country. So we, when I say we, the Occidental European colonizators went in with the aim of accumulating richness and destroying the nature and extracting the most out of nature, being that minerals, or being that cutting the trees and getting wood, and or being that capturing the animals, or yes, taking their meat, or exploiting them in other senses. And the indigenous populations, they lived in there in larger communities for over 10,000 years, in a perfect harmony, without destroying them. So this is one aspect, one element that I would say we can learn from them, and we should respect all of the ethnicities that live here in Brazil or in other parts of the world, of course, and live in harmony and exchange and support each other and help each other, and understand we are all, as I mentioned before, sharing the same planet. This is not happening, unfortunately. We live in a society that is very driven by money, and very driven by interest, very driven by the power that emanates from oppression and from physical power and ammunition or weapons, or other forms of power. And again, I think we need to evolve to societies that are more democratic, in real democratic appliance, and not just voting once every 4 years, and even then voting wrongly, the wrong candidates, and not punishing them when they are corrupt or when they don't respect basic fundamental rights of human beings. But yes, this aspect of living in harmony and respect with the original indigenous ethnicities that are in the world is very important, in particular in Brazil, where we have this richness, where we have these millions, over 5 million people that live still in their communities, and we have this richness to be protected and to be supported. Back to you.
You're very nice. Yeah, that's an interesting and interesting acknowledgement of the context that you came to. And yes, I guess I mean, we could continue this conversation for a long time, but I guess our proposition was to stick it within this frame of an hour. So I thank you so much for all your insights and sharing your experience and being able to convey all this information about your life, and that I'm sure will inspire others. And yes.
Great. Thank you, Pedro. And we will certainly continue to speak, you and me, because I am very curious to know always more from you. You are a person that is both in the nowadays leading edge impulses, initiatives on the technical side and on the social side, social innovation. And that's always very intriguing to me. So it's a pleasure always to talk to you. It was a pleasure to talk to you today here. And what I didn't mention, maybe a last comment, very briefly, I had in my life very deep moments of, how can I say that? Very deep moments where where things crushed in my life. And I was not really knowing where to go. These are moments that are very rich, because when you start building something that is very successful, you start believing in that, in the success, in your formula, in yourself, and that is then harming your further development. So having and being sensible for and being open to the moments of big crisis in life is important. Crises are there to question everything and to be reborn. So this, having had the chance in life to having been reborn several times, is a fortune that I had, and I wouldn't shy away from looking into that seriously and saying, well, that is a gift that life is giving me to just reframe everything and start over again. But thank you very much for this conversation. It was great to talk to you, and thanks to the ones that are still here after 1 hour and 6 minutes following us. Thank you very much.
Exactly, and those in the future that will be watching it. Yes, I mean, amazing. And just talking about those abilities of being reborn, I guess it comes back to vulnerability, and I think somehow vulnerability stayed as a very key word in the conversation, as this ability to form. Because if you look back into the title of like new ways of learning, somehow this vulnerability stays as this new way of learning, ability of being able to transform yourself into a new self when you have a crisis, because you are vulnerable as well in a moment of crisis, and being able to embrace this vulnerability, I guess, is something that maybe is a key is a key thing that happened in your life, and is there for others to also acknowledge. And I can also just reflect that, and I feel like I'm learning more and more to make myself vulnerable, and the more I learn that in different situations, the more I am able to get to know others truly, and get to know more of situations. So I can definitely resonate with that as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Pedro.
Thank you.